Welcome to a fascinating exploration into something we all experience but rarely stop to truly consider: the way we perceive time. Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab.
It's really something, isn't it? We've all had that feeling, time just flying by when we're having fun.
We're dragging endlessly when we're bored stiff.
Exactly. And that's not just like a feeling.
Yeah.
It's a real phenomenon called time perception. It's our own subjective take on how time passes.
Right. So while the clock on the wall measures time objectively, tick-tock, our minds experience it much more fluidly.
Absolutely. It stretches, it shrinks, depending on, well, all sorts of things.
So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack the science and the psychology behind why time feels so different in various situations.
And understanding this isn't just, academically interesting. It can actually help us in our daily lives.
How so?
Well, think about it. Improving productivity, maybe boosting mental well-being, even strengthening relationships. It all connects back to managing stress better, making smarter decisions.
And maybe just savoring life a bit more.
Precisely. Appreciating those moments.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then. What is time perception, fundamentally?
Fundamentally, it's our subjective sense of time's duration and flow. And it's influenced by, a whole range of factors.
Like what?
Our mental state, definitely. Our age, the environment we're in, the specific context. It all feeds in.
And it's not like there's one single time part of the brain, is there?
No, not at all. It's much more complex. It's an interplay between different biological, neurological, and psychological processes, all working together or sometimes against each other.
Okay, let's dig into the science a bit then. How does the brain actually process time?
Well, it's fascinating because several brain regions are involved. You got the cerebellum, which is key for timing motor tasks like catching a ball.
Okay.
Then there's the basal ganglia. They seem to be crucial for estimating time intervals, like how long did that red light last?
Right.
And the prefrontal cortex, that's involved in higher level stuff like decision-making and judgments about time.
So multiple areas contributing. It's definitely not just one internal clock ticking away then.
No, far from it. We actually seem to have multiple internal timers. Think about circadian rhythms. Those are our body's roughly 24-hour cycles managing sleep and wakefulness.
Or body clock.
Yeah. Then you have ultradian rhythms, which are shorter cycles, like the 90-minute sleep cycle is a classic example. And even biological pacemakers that operate on much shorter timescales, from milliseconds up to hours. So different mechanisms for different durations.
Wow, okay. So how do these different systems translate into our experience of time passing? Are there models for that?
Yeah, there are a few key models scientists talk about. One is the pacemaker accumulator model. The idea is there's sort of a mental clock emitting pulses.
Like a metronome?
Kind of, yeah. And another part of the brain, the accumulator, counts these pulses. More pulses mean more time has passed.
Interesting. What else?
There are also oscillatory models, which link time perception more to the rhythmic patterns of brain waves. And then there are attentional models. These basically say that how much time we feel has passed depends heavily on how much attention we're actually paying to the passage of time.
That makes intuitive sense, like hitting the snooze button in the morning.
Perfect example.
Those 10 minutes feel like maybe 30 seconds.
Right, because your internal clock and your expectations are completely misaligned. You're not really attending to time, you're drifting back to sleep.
Or waiting 30 seconds for the microwave. That can feel like an age.
Because you are paying attention to it. Your focus is entirely on that short interval.
Okay, so biology, attention. What about brain chemistry? Do things like neurotransmitters play a role?
Oh, absolutely. Neurotransmitters are key chemical messengers, and they definitely influence things. Dopamine is a big one.
How so?
Well, higher levels of dopamine seem to correlate with time feeling like it's passing faster. It might speed up that internal pacemaker we talked about. Serotonin is linked to mood, and some research suggests it might be involved in making time feel slower. And norepinephrine, which affects alertness and attention, well, that naturally feeds into how we track time too.
Got it. Now, something many people feel is that time speeds up as we get older. Is there a scientific basis for that?
There definitely seems to be. There are a couple of leading theories. One has to do with metabolic rate.
Metabolism, how does that affect time?
The idea is that as we age, our metabolic rate generally slows down. Younger people might actually process more information per unit of time, making subjective time feel denser, richer, and slower.
So more stuff happening per second when you're young.
Potentially, yes. The other major factor is novelty. How many new experiences are you having?
Ah, right. When you're a kid, everything is new.
Exactly. Every day brings new discoveries, new skills, new places. This creates lots of distinct memories, which makes time feel longer in retrospect. As we get older, life often becomes more routine.
Fewer novel experiences to mark the passage of time.
Right. So those routine periods can feel compressed when we look back. A year can feel like it just vanished.
That really resonates. That feeling of endless childhood summers versus, blinked and you missed it adult years. It's not just nostalgia then.
No, there seem to be real neurological and experiential reasons behind it. It's tied to both processing speed and the density of new memories.
And it's not just typical aging, right? Certain conditions can affect time perception too.
Yes, definitely. Conditions like ADHD are often associated with difficulties in time estimation and general time awareness. People might struggle with deadlines or judging how long tasks will take.
Okay.
Parkinson's disease involves dopamine deficiency, and since dopamine is linked to timing, that can impact time perception.
Makes sense.
And in schizophrenia, distortions in time perception are quite common, likely due to complex neurotransmitter imbalances affecting how reality and duration are processed.
So our internal biology, our development, our brain chemistry, it all plays a huge role. But what about purely psychological factors, like attention, emotions, memory?
Immensely important. Let's take attention. We touched on it, but when you're really focused on a task, absorbed in it, time can seem to fly. But if you're focused on time itself, like waiting,
It drags.
it drags. Conversely, if your attention is divided, maybe multitasking, time might feel shorter because you're not fully processing the duration. Distraction makes time seem faster.
I can definitely relate. A boring meeting feels eternal, but get me into a good book and hours vanish.
Exactly. And emotions are incredibly powerful shapers of time.
How so?
Fear and anxiety tend to make time feel slower, almost stretching it out. This might be because our brain goes into high alert, processing sensory details more intensely.
The slow motion effect in accidents.
That's the classic example, yes. Heightened alertness. But joy and excitement, they often have the opposite effect.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It really does seem to. Those moments often feel fleeting.
And you mentioned memory earlier, how it influences looking back. Can you elaborate on that?
Right. So retrospectively, how long a period feels is often related to how many new memories you formed during that time. More distinct memories equals a subjectively longer duration in hindsight.
Like the vacation example.
Perfect. The vacation paradox. The first few days feel really long because everything is novel, stimulating, memorable.
You're making lots of new memory markers.
Precisely. But by the end of the trip, things might become a bit more familiar, maybe routine sets in slightly, and those later days might blur together more. So looking back, the whole trip might seem shorter than you expected.
That's fascinating. It's about the density of memorable moments. Okay, we touched on age. Can we explore that a bit more systematically? How does time perception typically change across the lifespan?
Sure. For children, as we said, time often feels like it moves very slowly. They're very present-focused, absorbing tons of new information. Their days feel packed, therefore long.
The endless summer.
That's the feeling. Then, during the teenage years, the perception often starts to speed up. Routines become more established, school, activities. Hormonal changes might also affect emotional processing of time.
Right, things become a bit more predictable.
Yes. And for many adults, this feeling intensifies. Repetitive work schedules, family demands. Life can feel like it's on a faster track, and there's maybe less focus on time passing moment by moment.
Until you suddenly realize another year has gone by.
Exactly. And then for seniors, it's very common to report that time feels like it's accelerating even more. This could be due to fewer novel experiences still, maybe more time spent reflecting on a long life.
It's complex.
But that contrast, say a 7-year-old summer versus a 40-year-old,
Yeah.
it really highlights how experience, density, and routine change everything.
Absolutely. It's a powerful illustration.
Okay, let's circle back to emotions. You mentioned fear slowing things down, joy speeding them up. What's happening neurologically during those intense emotional moments?
Well, the amygdala, which is like the brain's emotion processing center, gets highly activated.
And the amygdala has connections to areas involved in timing, like the basal ganglia we mentioned earlier. Intense emotional signals from the amygdala can basically modulate the activity in these timing circuits.
So strong emotion actually alters the tick rate of our internal clock, in a sense.
That's a good way to think about it. For fear, that slow motion perception isn't just a feeling. It might reflect the brain going into overdrive, capturing more data points per second, perhaps as a survival mechanism. More detail might help navigate the danger.
A hyper-focused survival response. That makes a lot of sense. What about less intense but more sustained states, like high stress versus deep relaxation?
Yeah, that's different but also impactful. Chronic stress can sometimes feel like it's making time drag. Think of waiting anxiously for test results or counting down the minutes before public speaking. It might be linked to that heightened arousal state, speeding up the internal clock, making external time seem slow by comparison.
So stress makes your internal clock race, making real time feel slower.
That's one prominent theory, yes. Conversely, deep relaxation, like during meditation or maybe listening to calming music, often leads to a state where you lose track of time altogether. It just seems to disappear.
Time awareness fades.
Exactly. The contrast is stark acts of field. Think of a soldier in combat experiencing time very differently from a monk in meditation. It really underscores how profoundly our arousal level and emotional state shape our temporal world.
It's incredible how subjective it all is. Now, we've focused mostly on individual factors. Does culture play a role too? Do different societies experience time differently?
Oh, definitely. There are significant cultural variations. You have what are sometimes called monochronic cultures. Think of places like Germany, Switzerland, the US to some extent.
What characterizes them?
They tend to view time as linear, sequential, something you schedule, save, spend. Punctuality is often highly valued, one thing at a time.
Okay. And the alternative?
Polychronic cultures, common in many parts of Latin America, the Middle East, Africa. Here, time is often seen as more fluid, flexible. People might juggle multiple things simultaneously, and schedules might be less rigid, with more emphasis on relationships and completing interactions rather than sticking to a strict timetable.
So the value placed on schedules versus relationships changes things.
Precisely. And even language might play a subtle role. Some linguistic studies suggest that how a language structures talk about the future, maybe framing it as physically near or far, could potentially influence things like saving habits or long-term planning.
Wow. That's subtle but potentially powerful.
And think of practical examples. The almost unbelievable punctuality of Japanese public transport versus perhaps a more relaxed approach to timing in some rural communities elsewhere. It shows how cultural norms really embed a certain way of relating to time.
Fascinating differences. Okay, let's bring it back to everyday life for a moment. Can you give some common examples of when time typically feels fast versus slow for most of us?
Sure. Fast time is often associated with engaging, enjoyable activities where you might lose yourself. Watching a captivating movie, playing an absorbing video game, a great conversation with a friend.
Flow states.
Exactly. Flow states often make time seem to vanish. Slow time, on the other hand, usually crops up during periods of boredom, waiting, or discomfort.
Like sitting in traffic.
Classic example.
Huh.
Or attending a really dull lecture, waiting in line at the DMV. Any situation where you're disengaged or just waiting for it to be over.
It's amazing how a 2-hour flight can feel completely different depending on whether you have good entertainment or just stare at the seat in front of you.
Right. Distraction and engagement are huge factors in modulating that subjective experience.
Now, what about modern life and technology? Our world feels faster than ever. Is that changing our fundamental perception of time?
That's a really critical question. Our digital culture, instant messaging, next-day delivery, super short videos, it conditions us to expect speed and immediate gratification.
We're getting impatient.
Very possibly. This constant expectation of immediacy can make even brief moments of unavoidable waiting, like a slow website load, feel almost intolerable. Our baseline expectation has shifted.
And the constant stimulation.
That too. Digital media often provides frequent little bursts of dopamine, that reward chemical. This can make slower-paced offline activities, reading a book, taking a walk, even just thinking, seem comparatively dull or slow.
So real life can feel boring compared to online life.
For some, potentially yes. You might see teenagers, for example, who are constantly immersed in fast-paced social media, find activities that require sustained attention feel, as you said, painfully slow. It might indicate a kind of warping of their baseline time perception due to that digital contrast.
That's a bit concerning.
Okay.
Let's revisit memory again. We talked about novel experiences making time feel longer in retrospect. Can you expand on this memory density idea?
Sure. The core idea is that when we look back, our estimation of a period's length isn't based on the clock time, but rather on the number of distinct memories we encoded during that period.
So more memories leak a longer perceived duration looking back.
Essentially, yes. High novelty, lots of changes, learning these things create numerous unique memory markers. Our brain uses these markers to reconstruct the past, and a denser collection of markers leads to the perception of a longer duration.
And routine.
Routine periods, even if they span the same objective time, generate fewer distinct markers because things are similar day to day. So in hindsight, those periods can feel compressed, like less happened.
The classic example is the gap year of travel versus a year in a routine job, right?
Exactly. Both are 365 days. But the gap year is often packed with novelty, creating far more memory markers, making it feel subjectively much, much longer when you reflect on it later compared to the year of routine work.
Fascinating. Okay, what about altered states of consciousness? Things like drugs or deep meditation, how do they mess with time?
They can have profound effects.
Yeah.
Drug-induced states, particularly psychedelics, are famous for dramatically distorting time perception. Time might feel like it's stretching infinitely, contracting, looping, or even stopping altogether.
Wow. What about other substances?
Cannabis, for instance, is often reported to make time feel slower. This might be linked to its effects on the hippocampus, a brain area crucial for memory formation and sequencing.
And meditation?
Experienced meditators sometimes report reaching states where the sense of time completely dissolves. This could be related to reduced activity in the brain's default mode network, which is often involved in self-referential thought and mind wandering, including thinking about past and future.
So, reducing that internal chatter can make time awareness fade.
That seems to be part of it. Even general anesthesia provides a stark example. Patients often feel like no time whatsoever has passed between losing consciousness and waking up. It shows how deeply our normal conscious awareness is tied to our experience of time's passage.
It's like consciousness is the anchor for our timeline. What about sleep? We all do it, hopefully enough. How does sleep, or lack of it, affect time perception?
Sleep is crucial for regulating our sense of time. Sleep deprivation can definitely distort our judgment of time intervals. We might become worse at estimating how long things take.
Makes sense. Being tired affects judgment.
Right. It also impairs memory consolidation, which, as we've discussed, can make periods feel shorter or more fragmented when looking back. Plus, being tired often increases stress, which paradoxically might make time feel longer while you're awake and struggling through the day.
A double whammy. And dreams. Time feels weird in dreams.
Very weird. Dream time is highly condensed or expanded. You can have what feels like a long, elaborate adventure during a very short REM sleep cycle. Dreams aren't bound by real-world temporal logic.
And jet lag?
Jet lag disrupts our core circadian rhythm, our main 24-hour clock. This can definitely skew our perception of time during the day, making us feel out of sync, maybe making hours feel longer or shorter than usual. That surreal, never-ending feeling after pulling an all-nighter really shows how much the brain relies on consistent sleep cycles for proper timekeeping.
So sleep is fundamental for resetting and maintaining our internal clocks. Okay, let's connect time perception to attention span more directly. How does focus, or lack thereof, play out?
It's a strong link. As we touched on, multitasking often makes time feel shorter because attention is fragmented.
Right.
You're not deeply processing the duration of any single activity.
Right.
Deep focus on an engaging task, leading to that flow state, often makes time fly by without you noticing. But focus on a boring task makes time crawl because your attention is likely fixed on how slowly it's passing.
And focusing on the clock itself.
That's the killer. Actively watching the clock, focusing on time, almost always makes it feel slower. It's like the watched pot that never boils. Distraction is key for making time pass unnoticed.
The difference between losing yourself in a passion project for hours that feel like minutes
versus waiting 30 seconds for a slow web page, which can feel like an eternity. It's all about where your attention is directed.
Definitely experience both. Now, shifting to more difficult experiences, what happens to time perception during trauma or in conditions like PTSD?
Trauma can profoundly alter time perception. During the traumatic event itself, many people report time dilation, that slow motion effect. It's like the brain is trying to capture every detail.
As a survival mechanism again.
That's the prevailing theory. Afterwards, however, time perception can become fragmented. People might have trouble sequencing events, or the timeline might feel disjointed.
And with PTSD.
Flashbacks are a key feature of PTSD, and they often involve reliving the traumatic event as if it's happening in the present moment. This intensely disrupts normal temporal awareness, blurring the lines between past and present in a very distressing way.
Like being trapped in that moment.
You can feel that way, yes.
Yeah.
A car accident survivor recalling every shard of glass flying in slow motion, even if the crash itself was instantaneous, is a common type of recollection stemming from this altered time experience during trauma.
That sounds incredibly difficult. Okay, finally, let's think about the consequences. How does our perception of time affect our decisions and maybe even broader societal or economic issues?
It has surprisingly far-reaching implications. On an individual level, how accurately we perceive time, especially future time, influences our ability to delay gratification. People who are better at gauging future time intervals might be better at choosing larger, delayed rewards over smaller, immediate ones. This relates to future discounting.
What's that?
It's our tendency to see future rewards as less valuable, simply because they are further away in time. How much we discount the future depends, in part, on how psychologically distant that future feels. Choosing the small win now might reflect a perception that the future reward is just too far off.
So our time sense affects our planning and patience.
Absolutely. And on a societal level, think about cultural pace. Fast-paced cultures often prioritize speed, efficiency, quick results. Slower-paced cultures might prioritize quality, relationships, or sustainability over sheer speed. These are rooted in different collective perceptions and values around time.
And time poverty.
That's the subjective feeling of constantly lacking enough time, regardless of how many hours you actually work or have free. It's a major source of stress and burnout in modern life, linked to feeling overwhelmed and constantly rushed.
Even if objectively you have time, you feel like you don't.
Exactly. And consider the gig economy, where workers are often paid by the task or by the minute. This can create a hyper-awareness of time, turning every second into potential earnings or losses, which can really amplify pressure and anxiety.
Wow. It really permeates everything from individual choices to economic structures. It underlines that time isn't just a measurement.
Not at all. It's truly the fabric of our experience. Our perception of it is this incredibly dynamic and personal thing, constantly being shaped by our biology, our feelings, our memories, our focus, our culture, the technology we use, everything.
And understanding all these mechanisms hopefully gives us listeners some insight into our own experience of time, Adam.
That's the hope. You can start to notice maybe why time feels the way it does for you in different situations.
Yeah.
If it's flying by, perhaps that's a sign of deep engagement and joy, something to appreciate.
And if it's dragging,
maybe that's a cue. A cue to introduce a novelty, perhaps practice mindfulness to become more present in the moment, or maybe just acknowledge you need more rest.
So while we can't literally slow down or speed up the clock,
we can't control objective time, no.
Understanding these influences gives us more agency, maybe, more power to navigate our subjective experience of time with more intention.
Well put. It empowers you to potentially reshape how you relate to each day, each moment.
It really hammers home that time isn't just something you have. It's fundamentally how you live.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful, a real journey through the complexities of time perception. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's an endlessly fascinating topic.
If you, our listener, found this deep dive into time perception interesting, please do like this video, share it with others who might find it useful, and subscribe to this YouTube channel, the Learn English Lab, for more explorations into the fascinating world around us.